Thanks, Tim, and thanks everyone for tuning in and showing some interest in the company. As Tim mentioned, we are focused on gold and to some degree copper, but the main story is the gold we have in Colombia in two major districts. Next slide, please. Please go to any of our, okay, we've just passed that one. Please go to any of our presentations or announcements for the usual forward-looking statements and competent person statements, etc. Now, we recently welcomed two North American institutions to our register. These were global significant institutions, both wanting 5% or just under 5%. And so that was a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. And we also welcomed additional shareholders to raise a total of $20+ million at that time. So we're well funded right now. Our number one shareholder is Lizing Pty Ltd, which many might know as Dr. Fu's company. Bullet Holding Corporation at 4%. That's a well-established Colombian exploration house. It's been in country for 4 decades or so. And Anglo Gold Ashanti is the only major producer on our register, or in the top 20 of our register, at 1.67%. And that was the result of dissolving a joint venture with Anglo Gold Ashanti to acquire their position in one of the assets called Chusquel. And in exchange for that, they took a position in Los Seros. Next slide, please. So we sit on the Mid-Colca porphyry belt. That's that yellow colored strip running north-south in Colombia, and that extends on further down through much of South America. And if you can name a gold project in Colombia, chances are it sits on that Mid-Colca porphyry belt, from Buritica in the north through to La Colosa in the south, and some truly massive projects in that area. Now, we hold 2 projects, the Andes project, which is the much larger of the 2 projects, but much more earlier stage, and the Quinchilla project, which has been the major focus of our efforts for the last 18 months, and some discoveries there and some successes there has been the driver of our share price and market cap, and of course that recent capital raise. Next slide, please. Now, I put this slide in for those people who are coming in new to our story. This is a summary of some of the more significant drill results, and really just want to focus on gram meters to show that we have a very significant number of globally significant intercepts, and they're not just dedicated to one discovery. They're across Tesorito, Miraflores, Dos Quebradas, and so on. And some of these are truly significant. 629 meters at 0.88 for a gram meters intercept of 553 meters was one that we drilled earlier this year. And that, along with the 4th one down, which was also in January of this year, 320 meters at 1.5 gram per ton, essentially from surface as well. Those 2 earlier this year sat in the top 10 drill results for any company on the ASX for a good 5 months or so. They've now fallen off that top 10, but that gives you an idea of how significant those results are. But they're just 2 of many very significant results we have across the project area. Next slide, please. So let's focus now on Quinchilla. This is where the main activity has been. Next slide, please. It's a cluster of targets and discoveries in about a 3-kilometer radius, centered on Miraflores, which is an established reserve. It's a sub 500,000 ounce reserve, grading 3.3 gram per ton. In the north, we have targets like Dos Quebradas, Santa Sofia, and Los Lomas, and there's a few others up there as well, earlier stage that we're progressing. But the main focus has been to the south of Miraflores with 3 areas, Tesorito, Cebal, and Chusquel, which all kind of anchor themselves to the Mamoto Fault Corridor, which seems to be a major sort of pathway for mineralization in the area. Next slide, please. These are the financials of the Miraflores Dfs back in 2017. And you can see at $1,400 US an ounce, so not today's gold prices, but at $1,400 US an ounce, and an NPV of 8%, so a reasonably conservative NPV position. It's a reasonably good project in terms of its economics, running at a 90 million NPV. And of course, in today's gold prices, it would be, well, you'd hope it'd be better than that. But that's not the main story, even though we have a reserve there and it's going through the final stages of submissions for approvals. The main story is the fact that this sits in a much larger area with multiple discoveries, and in particular Tesorito, which is less than 1 kilometre away. That's been where we've had the bulk of the recent success, and calculating a maiden resource there is on our work plan. Next slide, please. So this is Tesorito. The first drill hole we drilled at Tesorito under new management in 2020, sort of late Q3 2020, was that third hole down in that table there, hole number 8, 230 meters at a gram per ton. And that really changed the trajectory of Los Seros. 18 months ago, we were sub 2 cents and market cap of 7 mil. And now we're bouncing around 14, 15 cents and 80 some million, and on the radar of some of the biggest precious metal funds in the world. So it's been an amazing 18-month journey. But what I really want to point out in Tesorito, which is a near surface or at surface gold porphyry, is two things. First of all, if you look at those drill intercepts in that table, they are all sort of 200 and 300 meter intercepts grading a gram per ton, some of them significantly better than that. And that's in itself is quite spectacular. But what's really spectacular and quite unique for Tesorito is a lot of those are sitting on the surface. Just look at that from row there, or column there, and you can see that almost all the intercepts that we've reported from Tesorito start on the surface. So we have a gold porphyry sitting on the surface grading a gram per ton, and in some areas grading even better than that. There's a few holes worthy of pointing out. Hole 14, you can see there is highlighted. That was the one that I mentioned earlier, running at 1.5 grams per ton, with a large section of that running at 2 grams per ton. Hole 16, 2 holes down from that, that's the one that looks a little unusual. You can see most of the drill results there reporting 200 to 300 meter intercepts, some slightly larger. And this one is over 600 meters long. And the reason for that is quite interesting and set us on a path of discovering or better understanding the regional structure here. Hole 16, and you might be able to make it out on the map there, drilled essentially across the main sort of diameter of Tesorito South. But rather than stopping drilling at the secondary fault you can see running from top of image to bottom of image on the left-hand side or the western side, we continued drilling past that typical or usual endpoint for another several hundred meters, and we hit another porphyry pulse of interest. And that's why hole 16 is nearly double the length of everything else, because we actually went through a second porphyry pulse at depth, and now we've called that Tesorito West, and we look forward to progressing that further in the near term. And the other group of results that I think are quite interesting and something that's going to really drive our future drilling program is the last few holes we've put out. So holes 24, 25, 26, 29 and 30. And yeah, 29 and 30. They are all were the intention of testing the outer limits of the mineralization. So they weren't in the main body of Tesorito South. They were trying to find the edges, and they're delivering some of the most spectacular results we've got so far, suggesting that those drill holes, and they all kind of radiate from one drill pad you can see on the right-hand side of that image, that the high-grade sort of central zone of the porphyry hits the surface there. And so most of the drilling over the last 9 months has really been in this sort of southern area, not sort of covering the whole sort of circumference of the potential area of mineralization, which begs the question, well, what's to the north and what's to the northeast? And that's where we've been drilling at the moment, pushing further in that direction. We have 3 drill rigs drilling in the north, and we also have 1 drilling in the south along a very broad front, because it remains open to the south as well. It's also slightly open to the east. As you can see, there's a few arrows there pointing to the east as well. But we do know when we hit the Mamoto fault, as you can see on that image there, that's the end of it. So there is potential to grow the envelopes in that direction, but we do know there is a limit ultimately with the Mamoto fault. Next slide, please. So this is a cross section, looking at the one on the right first. This is a cross-section describing essentially what I was just talking about. So you can see on the right-hand side, the big Mamoto fault gray lines that kind of define the eastern edge, and that secondary fault defining the western edge. And you can see there hole 16, which drilled through the body of the Tesorito South target area, went past that secondary fault and kept on going into another porphyry pulse. Now, that led us to develop a regional theory that's gaining more traction as we learn more. And that is that Tesorito South is actually part of a larger system, a nested porphyry system. And that leads me to that image on the left-hand side there. You can see Tesorito South, that football on the right-hand side of that image. That's where all that drilling's been. So 35 plus holes drilling in that area, defining Tesorito South. And then occasionally we've done deeper holes and gone in through Tesorito West in that second circle there. Now, a kilometre away, or slightly under a kilometre away, is Miraflores, the established reserve. Now, that's not a porphyry, that's a breccia pipe. Presumably the source of that, or the cause of that, is a porphyry somewhere, but no one's ever found the porphyry. And this theory, this regional model, gives some weight to where that porphyry source might be, and it might be this central zone. And therefore, Tesorito South and Miraflores are essentially bookends of a much larger system, in which we also see Tesorito West and this central target. And there is some evidence on surface, as you can see there, to suggest there is something going on at depth there. We've just completed deep penetrating IP and a drone mag survey over this area, and we expect that to highlight what's going on in this area ahead of drilling these target areas. Next slide, please. Cebal, I put this one in the pack because it has a lot of similarities to Tesorito. We hope it follows a similar trajectory to Tesorito. It sits on the same sort of structural address. So it sits on a north-south fault with a northwesterly sort of lineament cutting through it. And you see that's a common trend in all the big discoveries of the mid-Colca belt from Buritica south. We've drilled and released two results here, 500 metre long hole and a 586 metre long hole, both delivering 0.5 gram per tonne. Now that's the entire length of the hole. So both of those holes were that length and delivered 0.5 gram per tonne. We do have some assays pending here as well. We should be able to say something to the market about those relatively soon, about how Cebal is developing. But just 9 months ago, this was one soil sample on the surface, and that's it. So we've fast-tracked this through, given that it has a very appealing structural address to find a porphyry. Next slide, please. So that's the Quinchilla project, 3 kilometre radius of a number of targets, some very advanced and others that I haven't even talked about in the area. Now onto the Andes project. Next slide, please. As I said, this is the much larger area, but much more sort of greenfield. We have taken 14,000 surface samples here, and that's helped us define a great number of targets, a lot of epithermal high-grade gold, silver, lead, zinc type targets, and a few porphyry targets as well. And massive area. You can see there's this northwesterly orientation here, which seems to sort of drive or guide mineralization through the whole of the mid-Colca, and it's no different here as well. We have done some drilling here and had some reasonably interesting results from that drilling, but it's mostly greenfield targets that we hope to get to, if not late this year, then 2022. Next slide, please. So why Los Seros? Although hopefully I've already convinced you just by talking about Tesorito and the potential we have there. But let's go on and we'll talk about the rest of the project pipeline. So this is relatively unique for a junior to have such a significant project pipeline. We are not reliant on one project or one target to deliver. We've got a reserve at Miraflores, and as I said, that's going through final submissions. We have a resource at Dos Quebradas. I haven't even talked about that one, but that's within the Quinchilla project as well, to the northwest of Miraflores. We have drilling, or we are drilling at Cebal, at Chuscal, at El Columpio, which is one of the Andes projects, and at Tesorito. We are primed to drill at San Pablo when we choose to. And then there's a number of other targets in the sort of drill ready or preparation stages, which are just waiting either final approvals to be able to drill there or just some surface work before we drill at those. And then of course we've got the target generation area. 90% of the Andes portfolio we haven't even walked over yet, and we have a great number of targets at Quinchilla to develop as well to keep this project pipeline moving. Next slide, please. So very briefly onto our ESG credentials. We do work to the Sustainable Development Goals, and we've structured that around a meaningful sort of set of criteria that are particularly relevant to us. These are from our 2020 reporting, so you can see we invest quite heavily in local programs and the community. At the moment, it says 59 employees there, but at the moment we have about 100 because we're so active in the field. And of those 100 employees, 98 of them are Colombians. And so we're very much, and the vast majority of those live in Quinchía in the local town. So we're very much ingrained in the local community and in the local economy. Next slide, please. That's proved very important in the last sort of 18 months as the world's been grappling with COVID. Fortunately, with the success we've had at the drill bit and the fact that we are very well funded, we've been able to invest very heavily in employment with people in local communities that have lost their normal employment through COVID. And we've been able to bring them on in sampling teams and similar. So it's been a great opportunity for us to see beyond what we usually do and how we usually operate, and employ a large number of people and help Colombia, in particular Quinchía in that area, navigate this terrible virus. So that's the end of the presentation. Next slide, please, just the closing slide. So we have 4 drill rigs running at the moment. We have flagged the intention of a 5th rig. We are very well funded. We have a dedicated project target generation team. So we've got targets on the horizon that hopefully will go through that system as well. And with all that activity, hopefully 2022 will be just as exciting as 2021. And thanks for your interest.
Great, thanks, Jason. We've got time for some questions. We've got a couple of questions I'd suggest from shareholders here, and then a couple in more general. Now, you touched on this, but can you give us some more colour on the current standing of backlog assay results and how many are still sitting in the labs?
Yeah, it's been a difficult problem for us. Well, not unique to us. COVID has made a mess of the whole assay industry at the moment. So we're struggling with that as well. So we put out 3 results last week from Tesorito, and I believe there's probably another 10 assays pending. We have been working with the lab to try and break that backlog, and we expect the pace of assay turnaround to be much quicker now. But at the moment, it's sort of like 12 weeks now.
And Jason, Anglo Gold have an option expiring very soon. Do you know their intentions, whether they'll exercise that? I think it's out of the money anyway.
I don't know their intentions, no. And that was part of the deal to acquire their portion of Chusco, but I don't know their intentions.
Sure. Now, Colombia in general has made a lot of progress security-wise. Are your discoveries in a secure area, and can you give us a little bit more colour on what impact COVID's had on your current and near-term work activity?
Yeah, both the Andes and the Quinchía projects are in reasonably safe areas. The areas that still remain a bit of a problem are mainly sort of on the Pacific coast. As you know, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe even 6 now, there was a peace accord signed with the FARC, which ended the formal conflict in Colombia. And so it's a much safer place now and has been for many years now, as evidenced by the number of majors that are our neighbours now. The risk profile meets their criteria now, as maybe it didn't before. So our areas, are safe to be in. I certainly don't have any concerns when I'm in those areas. In terms of COVID, yeah, Colombia is really struggling with COVID. They have had a very aggressive vaccination program, and that's starting to show benefits now. So we are seeing light at the end of the tunnel there. In terms of Quinchía, where most of the team is based, that we're very fortunate. That is in the Andes Mountains, and it's at the end of a road, so it's no through traffic. If you're on that road, chances are you're going to Quinchía. And so it's been relatively easy to control the local town and COVID in the local town. We've also had a very wide vaccination program that's gone beyond our team. So we've had vaccinations go out into the community as well, and we have very strict COVID rules inside the company as well. So in terms of the impact it's had on us, we experience it when we need to bring materials in. So when we had to bring materials in from the port or similar, then we notice it. But in terms of our day-to-day operations, other than protocols, it hasn't really affected our operations.
And as a technical question here, does the terrain lend itself for low overburden rates, or are these resources sitting on the flank of a mountain?
Well, it's a bit of both. So Miraflores, which is the established reserve. That's on the side of a mountain, not particularly high elevations. We sort of bounce around 800 to sort of 1600, 1800 elevations. So nothing particularly remarkable there, but it is on the side. And that modeling of the DFS is an underground, in part because it's on the side of a mountain. Tesorito is on what's the best word, probably a sub-valley. So it's not the valley as such where the Mid-Coco River is. It's on a sort of a plateau area, probably 800, 1000 RL, and relatively flat. So compared to the Andes Mountains. So that does lend itself to potential bulk mining.
And Jason, finally, there's the question here from one of the brokers. What's your opinion on the gold price? It's been under pressure. What do you think will be the catalyst for resume buying interest in gold in the next 12 months? I always want to know your forecasts. I know you don't have a crystal ball there, but they'd appreciate an opinion from an expert.
Look, I've given up many years ago trying to predict where the gold price is going to go. I defer to people far more informed than I am. But I look at the amount of money that's being produced and the sort of global uncertainties around, and you've got to think it's got to be strong, right, in the next few years. So I know that's not particularly sophisticated, but that's how I see things. That I can see plenty of reasons for it being where it is now and being stronger. See very few for it going down.
And you're very well positioned in that regard. So, Jason, thanks for your time. Have a nice weekend, and love to get an update on the story probably early next year.
Thanks for your interest. Bye.
That's all we have time for. Thanks for your time. On Tuesday, there's that due diligence webinar on Magnus Energy Technologies. Watch out for that. That's our new series, single company webinar. See you again next week.